Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for part 2 of the LaMiLo final conference, where we talk about last mile logistics in city centers. The first session of this afternoon will focus on the last mile logistics barriers and opportunities seen from the private and the public sector perspectives. The aim is to understand the barriers faced by the private sector in implementing sustainable urban logistics and the changes required at a public sector level, policies, laws to achieve more efficient last mile logistics. I would like to welcome the following panel members: from the Cross River Partnership Project Manager Charlotte Knell, from the PTV Group consultant Philipp Lenz, as a representative of the Transport Minister of the Brussels government Matthias van Wijnendaele, from City Depot Marc Schepers, and from the Luxembourg Ministry of Sustainable Development and Infrastructure Max Nilles. Welcome all of you. Maybe, Charlotte, I could ask you to tell us something about your organization. So Cross River Partnership is a public-private partnership representing 7 local authorities in London and private partners?
Yep, so we represent the 7 central London local authorities, covering areas such as the City of London and the West End, and up to Camden and down to Brixton, if anybody knows London, but also 15 business improvement districts, which are private sector organisations covering smaller geographical areas.
And could you give us an example of the projects, the kind of projects that you're running?
We're relevant to this project. We're running the Freeview project, which is testing electric freight vehicles in Europe, across Europe. So we're leading on that project. It's got a little way to go yet, and it's drawing some interesting conclusions. We're involved in other types of projects around economic growth and sustainable employment. So that's kind of the sector that we're in. Okay, and you're here because you made a report with recommendations for the public sector. Without going too much into detail, but that's what you did for the LaMiLo project. Yeah, bring a public sector perspective. We'll speak about the content later on. Okay. From the PTV Group, Philipp Lenz. What is the PTV Group?
We're a software company located in Karlsruhe. Our motto is we plan and optimize everything that moves people and goods worldwide. And that starts with traffic management, traffic simulation software, goes back to for the public sector, and then goes to trip planning, trip optimization software, with many things in between. Mm-hmm. And what you have done is made a report or an analysis of the barriers encountered by the private sector. Yeah, so the private sector perspective onto city logistics, exactly. Okay. Marc Schepers, for City Depot. We know City Depot because Christophe has told us a lot about it this morning. So you specialize in smart city distribution in several cities in Belgium, of course.
Yes, since a few weeks we can say we are active in 4 cities, in the city of Ghent, Antwerp, Brussels and the city of Hasselt. Mm-hmm. That's the city where we started City Depot, I think 4 years ago now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Matthias van Wijnendaele, you are a representative of the Transport Minister of the Brussels government. I suppose you followed closely the Brussels Mobilité project.
Yes, of course. We have a strong administration, and I think it's interesting in the Brussels capital region that we are a region. We have a lot of competences, regional competences that can help to develop our logistic policy. So if you see the Flemish region or the Walloon region, they are consisting of a lot of cities, but also more rural area. But we are a city in itself, and this can be interesting to develop our policy.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, Max Nilles, you work with the Ministry of Sustainable Development and Infrastructure in Luxembourg. City logistics, what does it mean in Luxembourg? What are the issues there?
Well, my name is Max Nilles. I'm in charge of logistics and inland navigation in the Ministry of Transport. Mm-hmm. So we are the regulatory body in Luxembourg. And city logistics, of course, is the same than everywhere else. So we have problem of congestion, we have problem of CO2 emissions, and we try to develop a policy, and unfortunately we have not had the experience from our Belgian colleagues of 15 years of talks, as I have heard earlier, but we are just in 1.5 years of talks. But we have already done a study on city logistics in Luxembourg, so we have a multifaceted study done in Luxembourg about.
Yes, are there also consolidation centers and so forth in place? Or
no, as I said, it's just 1.5 year that it started. Now we are trying to develop the whole the concept of a city of a urban distribution center, and we have already the first ways of going. Of doing that, and we will implement that in the next years. But we focused first on a feasibility study, saying what is the volume, what is the problems, because we have a capital city, but which is very very specific with lots of valleys. So we have all taken all on board, which is valid in all the European cities, and then looked at our specificities to see what is necessary for Luxembourg.
Yeah,
we're working on it.
You need electrical bikes.
Yes, we have also on the policy level. We have also on the 8th of October there will be a ministerial informal conference from the transport ministers, and they will. What we try to do is to put the ministers of transport on a cargo bicycle, so that they knew what it is to have a bicycle and 200 kilos behind, and then drive.
That's what I said.
100 meters. Then
you need an electrical one, maybe. Okay, let's have a look at the content here. Philipp, Lenz, what are the main challenges faced by the private sector in urban logistics? You've made a list. You've made an analysis.
Yes, in our analysis. We especially focused onto the logistics service provider and the daily operation, and they said the competition is very hard, especially from Eastern Europe and people that only buy a van and work as a subcontractor. It's very difficult to work in those conditions. The people are not willing to pay a lot of money. It's not like in other markets where, for example, you have a premium product like cell phones or cars, where you can raise the price and maybe have some better quality. That's unfortunately not very. You cannot really do that. When in the logistics sector, it's very hard competition. In their daily operation, it's mainly things that we heard today. For example, finding a parking spot to deliver, congestion in the city, rising fuel prices, but also the fluctuation in the order, in the quantities. For example, at Christmas, usually you have a lot to deliver, whereas in the summertime, when everyone is on holiday, it's a lot less. You have to have your processes set up to deal
flexible.
with those, flexible, and to deal with those conditions. And then those are mainly things that all the logistics service providers said. But then, of course, there are the innovative new startups that said they want to have more transparency in the logistics chain, and of course, they want the internalization of external costs.
Okay. Yeah, we've talked about that a little bit this morning. Also, pricing, was that an element also?
Yeah, it's very hard to get the right amount of money from the customer. Of course.
Mr. Schepers, do you recognize those challenges as described by Philipp?
Yeah, of course. Though when we started with City Depot 4 years ago, with these challenges in my bag, I visited all the local governments. And I was.
So you went door to door, face to face. You talked with all the local authorities.
Yes. What I wanted to try is see if there was a way in which we could work together with local governments. So because they have an effect on all these or a lot of these elements you mentioned earlier, and maybe when we could work together with these local governments, the impact they have on our business case could be a positive impact, and that way we could stimulate the market and have initiatives like ours and others have a bigger chance on developing and keeping alive, actually.
Yes.
And that was 4 years ago, and now 4 years later, I think that local governments, and in Brussels is an example, the city of Ghent is an example, and other governments, local governments in Belgium are following. They are really seeing the necessity of acting and having a policy that is supportive. For example, installing the shopping area for pedestrians in the city center of Brussels is an example where transport companies, of course, will have a problem, but where companies like ours get a big chance on developing, and that's a nice example.
And that's happening right now in Brussels. The pedestrian zones are getting bigger and bigger. Eh?
Yeah, it's one of the challenges. The cities are changing at this moment. For example, in Brussels, we see pedestrian areas developing, and then you have the question of who has access to it, who has 24-hour access to it, because we can allow a lot of suppliers in a certain time frame, but when we give them 24 time access, it should be sustainable. It should be electrical, or and that's the moment that the new innovative companies come forward. Come forward. Yeah.
Okay, Charlotte. So you have made a report about the public sector. What can the public sector do to mitigate all of those challenges?
Yeah, so we've identified 12 policy measures, which won't come as any surprise to anybody sitting in the room, in terms of access, noise, time window restrictions, through policies to support cleaner modes of transport, through policies to support consolidation solutions like the demonstrators in LaMiLo. As I say, there's 12 of them, and we've identified from feedback from existing case studies as well as the demonstrators some top tips for implementing those, as well as try to analyse the costs and benefits by 3 different sets of stakeholders. So there's quite a lot of detail there, but from that work we've identified 10 recommendations which we think the public sector authorities can adopt in order to improve last mile logistics solutions and policies, and then the implementation of those policies moving forward.
And can you pick a few recommendations that are important?
I think a lot of them have been mentioned this morning, actually. So there's things around encouraging transparency of financial, economic and social costs and benefits associated with last mile logistics solutions, workarounds, encouraging clear communications, getting on political support, involving stakeholders in the design of policy and the implementation of last mile logistics solutions. There's certain really good examples of organisations themselves leading the way, and I think Camden is a good example of that, where they have they've got their policymaker hat on and their end user hat on, and they've also decided to actively solve the situation for themselves.
So you mean local authorities also using this kind of logistics? Yeah,
leading the ways, developing a solution themselves, being the leaders, and I think that could apply to other types of organisations as well, not just policymakers. There's other elements in relation to implementing a package of policy measures, so not just looking at one environmental zone, but bringing in a package that supports that in terms of cleaner modes of transport, and I think that just picks up on what Max was saying there in terms of then you're creating an environment which can support the types of innovative last mile logistics solutions that City Depot is running in Brussels.
Yeah.
So there's a whole kind of raft of things. And I think finally, something around making sure that policies are kept up to date. I think we need to review the kind of policies and regulations that we have in our city. Certainly in London, there's situations whereby there's a licensing on a building that's 30, 40 years out of date. And I think there's a sense of needing to review those and also then keep them up to date with moves in kind of technology, in cleaner vehicle kind of technology, as well as kind of changes in the way that we shop and the economy and society more generally. So, yeah.
Do you think it's a good idea what Mrs. Schepers did to go and talk to local authorities?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's clearly had some real benefit. And I think perhaps if you were starting those conversations now, then things may have been more different or more rapid, or I don't know. I think that it relates to a point that was made this morning about whether there's kind of a head of steam that has built up around this issue, and I think it really has. In London particularly, every day it seems that there's a headline about air pollution, and I think there's a real appetite from kind of all stakeholders, both the private sector and the public sector, to actually actively solve the problem and to be seen to be solving the problem. So I think it's a good time, I think, at the moment.
Mr. Nilles, what measures have you as a public sector organization already taken to make it possible to implement efficient last mile logistics?
Well, we did this feasibility study, which was quite successful in the way that we have sufficient market volume to create this consolidation center. So that was the first step. We did a little bit similar, like my colleague from my left said. We also developed some recommendations to implement.
Okay.
And of course, for us as a regulator, the first measure is to allow this, because our legal framework, our Code de la Route, which is the basis of how the cars are circulating, is not even allowing discrimination of electric vehicles. So at the first basis, it must be done to allow it. For example, to implement incentive-based models where you differentiate between clean vehicles and non-clean vehicles. So it's really, I think there was a lot of bottom-up exercise done in this kind of LaMiLo projects, but there's also a top-down approach, because otherwise it's not functioning, coming together very well. So that is one major issue we have discovered in our study. But of course, other issues which have not been mentioned is, for example, training, because the users of the cars, they must use different technology than it was 10 years ago, where they still had the key to open the shop. So now it's all this has to come together, and we are supporting all these projects, also having discussions with our communities which have to implement it locally, so that it all comes together and that it's not developing apart from each other. So that is our major role as a regulator, to build the right framework and to bring people together.
Mr. van Wijnendaele, what has the Brussels government done to put into place a framework that makes it possible to work with last mile logistics in sustainable last mile logistics in city centers?
The former government approved a plan, actually, with a lot of concrete actions in it. I think there are a lot of actions. I think there are two things very important. There are a lot of pilots that need to be developed, innovative projects together with universities, and pilot programs in the city itself. And on the other hand, we need push and pull factors, measures. One of the things we've done as government is now approved and put in place the congestion charge for trucks. This will be active the 1st of April in 2016, and this is of course causing a lot of friction in the transport sector, because we ask them some money at that point. But on the other hand, we will develop a lot of actions, infrastructure projects, developing distribution centers, on which City Depot is one example, and we will invest the money, part of the money of the congestion charge, into these innovative projects, these programs, and also the development of infrastructure. And on the other hand, we need, of course, to change some legislation as well, to make it more flexible, to put in place, to make it possible to act in the city. But the main goal always needs to be, and everyone needs to understand it, it's for the better of the quality of life in the city. And I think we need a lot of communication in it, because the people don't always understand why we need this congestion charge in Brussels, but also in the other regions. And we need to communicate and to evaluate also this project, and to really think about how to how to modify these measures, but also put in place new innovative things. And I think Brussels is developing to a smarter city, smart city with applications and big data as well. And I think the logistics sector has a big challenge to cope with. This is one thing in the future that's really important.
Okay, questions? Several. Okay, over there first from the Brussels Harbour, and then Frank van Seevoort here.
I have a rather straightforward question for the authorities. So everyone agrees that you should consolidate and also avoid empty transportation, but in order to avoid a dilution of the volumes and make it from a financial point of view more financial sustainable, do you think it's possible to grant one company based on a public offering the right to organize city distribution during a period of 3 to 5 years, for instance?
To give a monopoly to one of the, you mean then giving a monopoly to one of the companies?
So, well, the right, a monopoly to organize, so one party.
Without competition then?
No, based on a public offering, so that's competition, but then you avoid the dilution of the volume amongst several players. So instead of having 50% fill rate of a company or a van, you can have 100%. You could do it also in a positive way by allowing that company, for instance, access to the bus lanes or things like that.
Okay, so question, Max and Charlotte?
Yes, it's a very interesting question. But for example, when we did our feasibility study, it came out of it that it was enough volume for different players. So it would be very difficult to just. And we are a small city. Luxembourg is 140,000 inhabitants. Okay, it's not Brussels, it's not London. But I mean, if it's already in a small city, possible for different players to do it on a market-based approach, then it's very difficult to impose a concession. But legally, it could be feasible. But the market, in fact, shows that there is enough for different players.
Charlotte,
I think certainly in London, there's a sense that there are a number of different schemes in operation, a number of different consolidation centres as well as micro-consolidation centres. And I think we're at the stage now where the need is for a strategic approach to be taken to understand the level of volume that's required to make sure that we're just not setting up new pilots and new consolidation centres in different places without having a really considered view about whether or not they're sustainable. Because I think you could waste a lot of money by doing that and a lot of effort. So I think, Transport for London, who are here today, are currently preparing a long-term freight strategy, and I'm sure within that there will be effort to take a strategic approach. I'm not so sure that it would be about identifying that kind of solution, but I think it would be about taking a really considered approach about what is best to be developed and where, and then let the market come up with the implementation of that.
Philipp, do you agree?
Yeah, and legislation would be also a problem because, as far as I know, in Germany at least, it's impossible to give only one type of vehicle from one company the access to bus lanes. You can do it for electric vehicle and not allowed for conventional vehicles, but not from one company.
Yeah, so for transport mode, but not for
and
company.
Especially for medium-sized cities, I know it's a network and with many stakeholders in logistics. And if you'd give the concession to one company, all the others would be furious, of course. And usually it's that one logistics service provider maybe is giving or is funding a bit the football club or some other social responsibility issues they do, and I'm quite sure they would cut all of that immediately.
Mr. Schepers, how do you feel about that? Because City Depot in practice has more or less a monopoly in Belgium, or not?
No, there are several players, but I don't think that giving a concession is the best solution. I think that there has to be a platform model where all solutions active in a city can cooperate, and in that way you can have in several cities actually the same language spoken between partners. So the operational solution is the same in every city, and secondly, you don't get suboptimal solutions at the city itself, because there's a cooperation, there's a collaborative model in place, and that's actually what we are trying to do. Instead of trying to come in place of solutions in the city, we try to facilitate existing solutions by offering a cooperative platform.
Yeah.
And actually also offering IT. So IT is important to talk to each other operationally. And that's the way we try to cope with that question, that problem.
Next question from Frank van Steenvoort from Eurobrokers, logistics service provider.
In fact, I have two questions. First, the first one. First question. Looking to the public authorities on a city level, what is the exact role they have to play? Very open for the competition and let's say quite passive. Should they define the boundaries where the competition can be played, or should they really have strict regulations and from that perspective allow companies to offer city logistics or urban deliveries or whatever?
Maybe Charlotte can answer that one.
I can try. I think from our experiences in London, that different local authorities will have different attitudes towards placing restrictions, for example, around delivery times or encouraging and supporting off-peak deliveries. And perhaps that is just a reflection of the need to communicate more and persuade more kind of the political decision makers. But in our work, where we looked at the case studies from across Europe, it's very clear that many city authorities are actively placing restrictions in their city centres in order to manipulate and take a really proactive role. So I think it depends on kind of where you are. I think it depends on political will. Yeah.
In my interviews, I got very different answers to that question from the private sector, depending on the size of the company. That was quite funny. Especially very large companies really like any form of regulation because they have the volume, they have the money to apply them, and they hope. In my opinion, they hope to get rid of competition. Medium-sized companies were absolutely not in favor, but of course then very small companies doing using cargo bikes, for example, of course they were in favor as well.
That's interesting. Yes, and the second question.
I heard for Belgium, I heard Marc saying I visited all local authorities. To be quite honest, if you look to Belgium, it's 10 million inhabitants from the coast until the Ardennes. It's the same as the Greater London. Is it really worthwhile to talk with all those authorities individually, or should we lift the decision-making process to a higher level so that we have contingency amongst all cities in Belgium? At the end of all, Belgium is one great city compared to London.
Yes, but now the different cities are different. Well, it's a different way of working in the different cities for you, eh?
Yeah, and it's also a different time. 4 years ago, nobody was talking about urban distribution. There were some failures, some exercises, some pilots nobody never talked about. And my mission at that moment was try to get things alive again and put it on the agenda. That was the first mission. The second mission, of course, is trying to make the local government a partner in the solution. And I just explained about the platform we are trying to install in a city. Well, that platform is a platform of stakeholders, and one of the stakeholders are small retailers, other are big retailers, other are local companies active in urban distribution, and one of the stakeholders is the city itself. So we are providing a platform in which the city is a partner in providing a sustainable urban distribution solution, and trying to design this platform was also in designing this platform, it was important to have this dialogue with these local governments. But I agree, there has to be a framework of a regional government. So there has to be a framework, because if this framework is not in place, local governments will react in all different ways, and there will be policies as much as there are stars. So that's a problem.
Matthias, you don't agree?
Not completely, but I think that it's really something for cities to develop. When they develop a policy about logistics and last mile logistics, it has to be on the local and the city level. I don't believe that, okay, maybe we can have some basic legislation on European or federal level, but the smart things, the smart solutions, they will be put in place on city level. And then, of course, we can connect different cities, we can have platforms that communicate with each other. Of course, Antwerp and Brussels, they don't live apart from each other, but I really believe in the power of the cities in this case. Because they have the problems, they have the solutions, the environmental problems, for example, but also the solutions for the last mile as well. So I really believe that it should be organized on city level.
If I can read. So I agree with Matthias, but what I wanted to say was there has to be somebody pointing the way. So there has to be some kind of not really regulation, but let's say a book of inspiration or whatever you can you name it, on which the legislation or the policy of local policymakers can be inspired. So that's actually what I mean. This kind of baseline you talked about.
Yeah. Okay. Another question? Yes, over there.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Godfrey Schmidt, European Shippers Council. Sometimes from my membership I hear that the off-peak distribution is very important, and they plea for instance, the principle of having the ability to distribute in cities 24 hours, 7 days a week. In fact, with the project we are working around these peak hours. The cause of these peak hours are mostly the commuters and not the goods transportation. Would it be an idea to have also enablers, for instance, in cities like lockers for SMEs, so that you can have night distribution and give them the opportunity to use environmental friendly opportunities as were developed and presented this morning, and to have, for instance, an exemption for this kind of transportation to be exempted from time windows and to be exempted from for the opportunity to have night distribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been trials in London. There's trials going on at the moment in some boroughs for different things, and I know there's been work in New York as well. There was a Quiet City seminar held last November in London, which attempted to look at the whole debate. And I think there's all sorts of really exciting things that can happen to support both SMEs and businesses and their staff to make the most of nighttime deliveries and to make it smoother. From the public sector point of view, I think certainly some of our local authorities need to be persuaded that that is the right approach to take, particularly as our city is becoming more populated by residents. I work on Victoria Street, which is a very, very busy, always been a very kind of high office kind of block, and they're tearing down the offices and putting in mixed-use developments. So on our 13th floor, you look out and it's going to look into someone's bathroom, I think, but I don't think it's probably going to be a bathroom. But so the nature of our city centres is changing, and I think there is some work to do to persuade everyone in perhaps public policy that off-peak is the way forward. But I know that some boroughs are trying it. I'm sure that Camden are. Yeah, perhaps if we can demonstrate that it doesn't cause problems with residents, the noise issue isn't a big one, and the technology's there to actually support that, and then the technology is used effectively, that the case can be made and that it can roll out. Because I think there are lots of exciting things happening around it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Other questions?
I can say something for the...
One question? Yes, yeah, but go ahead.
In the interviews with especially medium-sized logistics service provider, out-of-hours delivery, as they call it, was pretty much the only idea for improvement that they had. So they were very in favor of that and said that if they were allowed to do that, they would even consider buying electric vehicles for that, if that was the condition to do that. And they would then share the amount of money saved in the operation. They would share that with the retailers. But when you talk to retailers, they usually say, we don't believe that.
Okay.
We don't think they will share it with us.
Okay, I think it's very clear that collaboration between public and private sector is the best scenario to move ahead, to achieve sustainable logistics in the cities. If so, how can we create more collaboration between private and public sector?
In London, there exists and has existed for a while the Central London Freight Quality Partnership, which there are other examples of freight quality partnerships out there, which brings together the public sector and the private sector. I think it's really, in order to engage people, I think we need to have the evidence and the data that supports the claims around reductions of costs, and around the costs and benefits associated with last mile logistics solutions. And I think that's about the transparency issue that we were talking about this morning. It's about some of the kind of nitty-gritty kind of evaluative stuff. And if you can demonstrate to the private sector, actually, if you take this solution, it's going to save you money or it's going to be cost neutral, then I think we've found from our experience working with our private sector partners that that's something that they want to know and that will get them engaged. I think people's drivers are different. The public sector is driven looking at the problems around air pollution and health and traffic congestion and safety. And whilst I think they are important to the private sector, particularly to kind of retailers and businesses, it may not always be their priority in terms of their decision making about whether they take on a last mile logistics solution. So I would say there's those elements that I think need to be really, the data needs to be available in order to get people on board. And I think once that data is available, I think that forums like the Freight Quality Partnership are a good one forward, but yeah, Emma.
No, it's fine. Anyone else has an idea? Yeah, Marc.
Yeah, I think that we also there's kind of projects like LaMiLo bring together private and public sector, so it's very important. These kind of projects, they raise awareness. For example, also we launched the Lean and Green Award in this context, which is also creating awareness of green logistics, and we think also that we can combine in some way this labeling and the green logistics on the urban level. So I think that we as public authorities have also the workload to connect the dots and to see it also on a larger level. I spoke before that there will be this issue of urban transport on the European agenda. It will be the first time because it's in fact subsidiarity. So in fact the European Union has no say in this local policy, but I think it always has a say and can help to develop it. And all these projects, support of infrastructure, support of projects, can be a way of fostering more cooperation.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, we're going to close this session. I would like to thank Marc Nilles, Charlotte Knell, Philipp Lenz, Marc Schepers, and Matthias van Wijnendaele. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And yes, We'll have one last break before the last session because we want to close around 4:15, and we'll have a short break, 15 minutes, and we'll start again at 3:15 then. Thank you.